Hi there, BookTube, and welcome to a new video, which is going to be my first update on the March of the Mammoths, which, if you don't know, is throughout the month of March. You are encouraged in a readathon of a book of at least 800 pages, and this was initiated by Lukács at Totally Pretentious, Big Owl's Books, and Jason at Old Blues Chapter and Verse. And the book I chose is David Foster Wallace, Infinite Jest, which is 1,000 pages. And before all this started, I was in two minds whether I'd be doing update videos, because I tend to show myself up when I'm sort of talking about a book as I'm going through it, because normally I get it horribly wrong and the rug is pulled from under my feet. But the reason I'm going to do an update, or at least this might be the one and only update until I finish it, but anyway, is because this whole process of a mammoth book has had some interesting sort of psychological effects on me as a reader, which I hadn't anticipated. So I thought I'd talk about those as well as my initial thoughts on the book. Okay, so I mainly read on my commute to and from work, which is about 35 minutes long each way. I average about 30 pages a day. Sometimes it might be more if the book lends itself to faster reading. With this, I'm averaging 16 or 17 pages a day, partly because of its density of writing. By page 10, he'd used the word enfilade, which is a word I've used in my own writing, so I know what level the vocabulary of this is, and it's like, bring it on. And I managed to get up to about page 156 before I actually had to break away and look up my first word of the book, which was erumpment, which is a brilliant word I'd never come across, which is sort of a bursting out of, sort of pods from a plant or bacteria or light moss, that kind of thing, sort of bursting out of their host. And it is dense. Today I was reading and there's 4 pages without a paragraph breaks. There's no place to take a pause. But it's not just that. So I didn't start this till Monday the 4th of March because I was finishing up some other books. And by the time of Thursday, which is the 4th day, I'd seen that I was at a pace of 17 pages a journey, or 34 pages a day. Not great progress. And Friday I tend not to work, but I did have a commute on Saturday. And I put this in my bag for Saturday, and then I took it out because I was actually desperate to read something else. So I put in a non-fiction book that I was reading and took that on my commute. And ended up finishing that, I think 150 pages of that in my weekend reading. I read none of this over the weekend. And that's an interesting thing I hadn't predicted, that, it's all very well having a mammoth book and committing yourself. 1,000 pages, I would have to read 250 pages a week of this. And by that Thursday of the first week, I was on page 109. Rather than 250, so I was way behind schedule. But instead of wanting to make it up, I was just I was desperate to read something else because I felt I wasn't making any progress. It's such a sort of tall order, such a sort of big target. I felt a bit sort of deflated, really, and I thought, well, I'm going to read something else because I know I can make progress through that, which is an odd sensation because no one else is setting. It's a bit of fun, March of the Mammoths. If you don't finish the book within March, you don't finish the book. But again, I don't want this dragging on into April, precluding that I can read other books. It won't be the rules say I can't read other books. It will just be, I've got to finish this, and it will just sort of like a black hole. It will sort of suck in any energies I have to devote to this. And this isn't a reflection of the book itself. This is just the physical manifestation of this mammoth type of book. So all that's been very odd. So the second week, which we're in now, the target is really to sort of be up to page 300, which will be a third of the way book by halfway through the month. So not really where I should be, but better than where I am. I don't know if I'm going to make that. I think I'm going to end up on about page 240 rather than 300. So I'm going to fall way behind with this book. And, again, I want to read other things. When I read the non-fiction, I sort of justified it as, well, this is non-fiction. This doesn't conflict in any way. I didn't allow myself to read other fiction. But actually, if I'm going to get anywhere with this, then I actually need to not read anything else. But as I say, I'm struggling with that a bit. I actually think this book, in retrospect, the perfect way to read this book, perhaps, is to read 20 pages a week for 52 weeks a year. Now, you might suffer from sort of remembering all the details of characters and events and stuff, so that might work against that. But I found this book to be very episodic, very sort of set-piece tableaus. There's no sense of movement at all in this book that I've detected I'm now on page 173. That's not to say there won't be, but it's taken an awful long time to set the scene if there is going to be any movement. I just want to read something from David Markson, who's one of my favourite writers, because in his book This Is Not a Novel, he's writing a book where he's avowedly not writing a plot and not having characters, and yet the writer character in that book says this: yet seducing the reader into turning pages nonetheless. Actionless, writer wants it, which is to say with no sequence of events, which is to say with no indicated passage of time, but then again getting somewhere in spite of this. And I think so far that's the difference between Markson, which that is a page turner, and that does have a sense of progression, and this, because this doesn't, the events don't make me want to turn the pages to find out what's happening next, because I know there's going to be another event, brilliantly described in many ways, but just not enough sort of momentum from what's gone before to make to sort of make me sort of speed up, really. There are some of the set pieces are great. They're brilliantly written. They're funny. So there's one where there's a female tennis player of sort of Serena and Venus Williams sort of stature compared to most women, and she's in a tennis boarding school, specialist, school for tennis players, and to keep the hair out of her eyes, she's got a top knot, and Wallace describes it as looking like a missile emerging out of a silo, which is a brilliant metaphor. And she was desperate to escape home, to go to a boarding school, because of her transvestite father who borrowed all her clothes. And so something like that was sort of brilliantly described. And another sort of funny setup is there's a sort of spy cum assassins ring who are sort of hunting down Quebecois separatists, in Canada. But the two characters are involved in it. Are they both double agents? Are they flying under two flags? All that kind of stuff. And one of them's in a wheelchair because his assassin's cult, they're all wheelchair born. I don't know if they're actually paralysed or that's just their sort of disguise, as it were. And the first time they appeared, it was really, it was funny, it was inventive, it was imaginative, it was a bit kooky. But every other time they've appeared so far, it's exactly the same. It's added nothing. And then there are other set pieces. There's one about sort of, again, another transvestite with her two cronies, or his two cronies. And they sort of, they're drug addicts, and, they boost or steal from shops, and they mug people for money. And that scene is, we've seen it described in very similar fashion in Last Exit to Brooklyn by Hubert Selby Jr., which predated this by 20, 30 years. It's nothing special. It adds nothing. And that's the thing, as good as the female tennis player scene was, can you sustain that level of imagination and creativity and humour through, I don't know how many episodes are in here. If it's, let's say they're about 5 pages long each, it's 1,000 divided by 5, whatever that, 200 episodes. No, you can't. And some of them are derivative. And ultimately, also, what's this a book about? Well, it's a satire about, the addictive American society, literally addicted to drugs, be they prescription drugs or be they illegal street drugs. TV and entertainment as addiction, tennis and sport, and that whole thing, drive to get to college and to be the top player in your college so you get a professional contract, all this sort of stuff. Yeah, we get it, David. America's an addictive society. The tennis stuff. On the one hand, there's really interesting, thought-provoking stuff because they're all kids. They're 14, 15 years old kids in this tennis school, and they're things like their bodies are broken by the constant practice and stuff. and also, you know, their skin, where because they're playing in Arizona and places like this, you know, the different pigmentation of their skin, where it's covered up by clothes, the tennis clothes, and where it isn't. All that stuff like that was really eye-opening. But then there's all the stuff about, well, you know, we're at a school, we're all supposed to be a community, but because tennis is an individual sport, only one of us can come out on top, and there's rankings, and you only care about your place in the ranking. Again, bog standard, not really insightful, and yet there's page after page of that. So I don't know. You know, if this knits together and has some sort of momentum and movement, then it could well take off. But at the moment, 173 pages in, which is a hell of a lot of reading. You know, that's 2/3 of a normal book that I would read in length, and nothing's moving forward. Nothing's progressing. It's not all just background and exposition. It isn't. Therefore, what is its purpose? So I don't know. This isn't. You know, so far this was never going to be the novel that was going to save Western literature. As I say, it's quite derivative in other places. It's comic satire, slightly knockabout, yes, written with very high literary standards, but, you know, that in itself, I don't think so. For, you know, stylistically or sort of, you know, formally, I don't think it's doing a lot. I meant to say also one other psychological thing it's had is this really is a two bookmark book. One for where you've left off reading, and the other is for the footnotes. So I haven't quite got it together to put a second bookmark in here, but every time I open the book to start reading it, obviously you take the bookmark out. Normally you just stick it somewhere random. Here I have to put it in where I've reached in the footnotes, and that slows your progress up. And I don't know a lot of the footnotes why they're there. You know, a lot of them are sort of describing the effects of, you know, the legal prescriptive drugs and the illegal sort of chemical substance of other intoxicants, and you know, I don't really see them as adding anything, but interspersed between them as footnotes of, you know, stuff about his sort of, you know, these Quebecois stuff that he's made up that you kind of need to know. So every time you come across the little number, you know, super text and think, oh, go to the footnotes. Is this going to be a relevant footnote or not? So there is that back and forward, which also slows progress. So that's it really. I don't know how I'm going to get through this in terms of, am I going to read other stuff on the side? So as I say, you know, last weekend I ended up reading none of this because I was hungrily devouring some non-fiction. You know, it's a bit like sort of, you know, giving something up for Lent. I have to give up all other non-fiction for March to read this, which is, I'm struggling with that. I mean, obviously I don't have to. I can do what the heck I like. But the more I read other stuff, the less progress I make in a book that I'm finding hard to make progress in anyway. So, but we will battle on. We will persevere, if only to see where this book goes. You know, does it develop a momentum? I sure as heck hope so. Okay, so I don't know if there's going to be any more updates on this. You know, lap of the gods. So thanks very much. Till next time.